Bitcoin is not just money, it is your future because money affects almost every part of your life. It affects where you live, how much pressure you feel, how long you have to work, how much freedoms you have, and what choices are available to you when life changes. That is why Bitcoin matters. It is not only about price, it is about the kinds of life you are able to build over time. Most people hear the word Bitcoin and immediately think about charts, headlines, and volatility. They think about whether the price is up this week or down this month, but that is usually the surface levels conversation. The deep conversations is about what Bitcoin actually does for a person who want to protect their times, their energies, and their futures. Think about how most people live. They work hard, they get paid, they pay bills, they try to save what's left. Then they repeat that cycle again and again. In somewhere in the middle of that cycle, something starts to feel off. Prices keeps rising. The cost of daily lives keeps getting heavier. Rents go up. Food costs more, insurance climbs, utility rise. Yet many people are doing everything they were told to do and still feel like they're all falling behind. That feeling is not imaginary. A lot of people feel it, even if they cannot fully explain it. It feels like running on a treadmill that keeps moving faster. You are still putting in effort, but the ground under your feet keeps shifting. That is where Bitcoin starts becoming more than an investment topic. It starts becoming a life topic. Bitcoin is different because no one can simply create more of it on demand. No companies can vote to increase the supply. No governments can design to print more of it behind your back. No central group can rewrite the rules whenever it is convenient. Bitcoin has a fixed supplies, and that changes everything. Because when something is fully scarce, it forces people to think differently about values, times, and saving. That is one of the biggest shifts Bitcoin introduced into a person's mind. Traditional money often trains people to spend now because their currencies may buy less later. Bitcoin pushes many people into the opposite directions. It makes them think long term. It makes them think about saving. It makes them ask better questions. How do I protect what I earn? How do I plan beyond next month? How do I build something that lasts instead of always reacting to what is urgent? This is why Bitcoin is not just money. It changes your relationships with the futures. And let's keep this grounded. Bitcoin is not perfect. It moves up and down, sometimes sharply. It can test your patience. It can test your emotions. If all you do is watch the chart every day, it will drag you into a very noisy mental state. One green candle makes people feel invincible. One red candle makes people feel foolish. That emotional roller coaster traps a lot of people. But the people who tend to understand Bitcoin more deeply eventually realize that the loudest signal is not always the most important signal. Price is loud. Headlines are loud. Social media is loud. But underneath all of that noise, quieter things are happening. Most people are learning about it. More businesses are building around it. More families are using it as a long-term savings tool. More people are asking harder questions about the systems they live under. That process is slower, quieter, and far more important than daily dramas. A lot of the most important shifts in the world start that way. First, they are ignored. Then they are mocked. Then they are attacked. Then slowly, almost quietly, they becomes normal. The internet followed that path. Smartphones followed that path. Digital payments followed that path. Bitcoin has followed that same patterns for many people. At first, it seems strange, then risky, then controversial, then eventually, for some people, it becomes obvious that they were looking at something much bigger than they first realized. Now, let's make this personal because this is where evergreen video really connect. Imagine two people living through the same world. Both work hard, both deal with inflation, both face uncertainty, but one store all of their savings only in a forms of money that keeps losing purchasing power over time. The artist decides to consistently save at least some of what they earn in an asset with a fixed supplies. They do not have to be rich. They do not have to make huge moves. They simply becomes intentional. 5 years gone by than 10? Which person is more likely to feel stronger? Which person is more likely to have options? Which person is more likely to feel less trapped by the financial system around them? That is why Bitcoin is bigger than charts. It can become a discipline tool. It can train people to think clearly in a world designed to distract them. It can train patience in a culture obsessed with speed. It can train consistencies in a culture that wants instant rewards. It can train ownerships in a world where many people are used to being controlled by systems they do not understand. And that is where Bitcoin has become deeply personal. Because the truth is, Bitcoin does not just expose the flaws in money. It exposes the habits in us. It exposes impatience. It exposes fears. It exposes greed. Many people want life-changing results right away, but they resist to boring habits that actually create a better future. They want certainty without effort. They want convictions without study. They want outcomes without discipline. Bitcoin does not let you hide from that for very long. This is why some of the people who do best with Bitcoin are not necessarily the loudest or the flashiest. They are often the steadiest. They learn, they study, they stay calm. They avoid comparing themselves to strangers online. They stop trying to look rich and start trying to become hardest to break. That is a complete different mindset. Now let's talk about freedom, because that word gets used too casually. Freedom is not always some glamorous fantasy. Sometimes freedom is much more basic than that. Freedom is sleeping better at night because you know you are building something for yourself. Freedom is not feeling like your savings are melting while you do everything right. Freedom is having mobility if life forces you to change direction. Freedom is having an options outside the old system instead of depending on it for every part of your future. That kind of freedom matters because choices shapes life, and the more real choices you have, the less trapped that you become. This is also why even small amounts matter. You do not need to own a whole Bitcoin. You do not need to impress anybody. You do not need to chase some online status games. That game is empty. What matters is directions. Are you moving toward more ownerships or less? Are you becoming more intentional or more distracted? Are you building something quietly or just consuming noise all day? Even a modest recurring buys can mean something important. It can be your ways of saving. Am I thinking ahead? Am I not living only for today? Am I trying to protect part of my future? That mindset repeated over time, you can change more than the people realize. Now, a lot of people will still ask the obvious question, what if Bitcoin drops? And that is a fair question, but the biggest issues is this. Almost everything in life carry risk. Job carry risk, businesses carry risk, housing carry risk, governments carry risk, currency system carry risk. The real question is not whether risk exists. The real question is whether you understand the risks you already live with and whether you have chosen them consciously. Many people are terrified of Bitcoin volatility because it is visible, but they are strangely comfortable with inflation because it is familiar. They fear the things that move sharply on a screen while ignoring the things that quietly eats away at their lives years after years. That silent erosion has consequences too. It affects retirements. It affects family stability. It affects stress. It affects how much of your life you have to trade away just to stand still. That is why Bitcoin matters. Not because it promises easy wealth, not because it removes all uncertainties, not because it magically solves every financial problem. Bitcoin is not magic. It will not budget for you. It will not replace discipline. It will not protect you from every mistake. But it can give responsible people a tool for saving, a tool for planning, a tool for preserving the values of their work, a tool for stepping out of systems that often feels designed to keep people on the defensive. And when you look at it that way, the whole conversation change. Instead of asking, what is Bitcoin going to do next week? You start asking better questions. What kind of futures am I trying to build? What kinds of money do I want to save in? What kinds of systems do I want my families relied on? Do I want my life to be built on a something that can be diluted, manipulated, and changed without my consent? Or do I want at least part of my futures connected to something fixed, transparent, and predictable? Those are deeper questions, and it matters more. That is why Bitcoin is not just money. It is your futures. Not because it guarantees riches, not because it's turned life into a fairy tale, but because it gives people another path, another standard, another frameworks for thinking about values, time, savings, and ownerships. And in a world where so many people feel financially cornered, another path is not a small thing. It is a serious thing. It can be the beginning of a completely different mindset, a different family's conversations, a different long-term plans. So take your time, learn slowly, don't rush, don't try to impress anyone. Don't let noise make decisions for you. Build quietly, study deeply, stack what you can, focus on understanding, not just excitement. Because the loud world celebrates appearance, but the future usually rewards substance. And this is the real point. Bitcoin is not just about price. It is about what kinds of life becomes possible when you finally choose to think further ahead than the system wants you to do. And don't forget, my friends, to hold it tight and stack it right. Take care.